Hello readers by eyes and by ears, this is Mari Chen and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are continuing with the reading of The Disabled Tyrant's Beloved Pet Fish, also known as 残疾暴君的掌心鱼宠 by Xue Shan Fei Hu. We're covering chapters 25 through 28 today, so I hope you all enjoy. Chapter 25, Fish Eating Dessert. At first, Ye Qinghuan thought it was just a joke, and he read the letter with a smile on his face. The letter was only a couple of lines long, but by the time he finished reading it, Ye Qinghuan's expression had changed. Prince Jing treated Ye Shizhi flippantly, but Ye Shizhi was still his younger cousin. Naturally, he wanted to know what had shocked him to this extent. He glanced at Wang Xi. Wang Xi stepped forward and spoke for him. Ye Shizhi, what's the matter? Ye Qinghuan looked like his soul had left his body, and it took a while before he returned to his senses. He passed the letter over and asked, Tianchi, do you know who wrote this letter? Wang Xi took the letter and handed it to Prince Jing without even reading it. But when Mu Tianchi skimmed through it, he was shocked. The writing on this letter was probably the most disjointed thing he'd ever seen in his life. There were only a couple characters written correctly. Most of them were missing strokes, as crooked as if they'd been blown over by the wind. A 6 or 7-year-old child could do better than this. Not only were the characters ugly, but the letter spoke of an event that made one's blood run cold. The second prince intended to harm Ye Qinghuan by framing him for killing the princess of Jinjue. The letter warned Ye Qinghuan to keep an eye on the second prince's actions and, more importantly, not to trust the sixth prince. The emperor only had 4 other princes who'd come of age. Everyone knew that the sixth prince was the third prince's follower and that the second and third princes were butting heads. Meanwhile, Prince Jing didn't get along with any of them. This thin piece of paper mentioned 3 of the 4 princes in addition to Ye Qinghuan, who was obviously related to Prince Jing. As Prince Jing realized this, his expression turned serious. The house of Changle was the former empress's family, so the emperor relied heavily on them, and their rich, stable future was pretty much guaranteed. The D princes born of the former empress had all either died young or been disabled. The house of Changle had no legitimate prince of their own, and with their current status, there was no need for them to align themselves with any of the princes. The duke rarely had any contact with the princes, as he wanted to avoid conflict as much as possible, but conflict would find them. The letter had been delivered through Xiongfeng. It was written extremely strangely, and its contents were even more unbelievable. Ye Qinghuan couldn't tell if it was real or not, and he had other misgivings as well. Was it perhaps a trap to trick the house of Changle? Mu Tianchi gave it some thought and coughed lightly. Ye Qinghuan lifted his head at the sound to see Prince Jing pinch a mark on one of the names on the paper. Ye Qinghuan could tell that Prince Jing was trying to bring his attention to the words, the Princess of Jinjue. Ye Qinghuan paused. Are you asking why the Princess of Jinjue? If it was anyone else, it might have been more believable, but the Princess of Jinjue? Neither Prince Jing nor Ye Qinghuan had heard any recent news about Jinjue, and it was quite far from their own capital. They'd never even seen the princess, so why would the second prince kill someone like that and frame Ye Shizhi for it? And there was the dilemma. If the letter was just a trap to trick the house of Changle, there would be no need to involve a foreign princess. Thus, Prince Jing was more inclined to believe, or at least partially believe, the letter. Prince Jing took a brush and paper and wrote, Be prepared just in case. Ye Qinghuan fell silent for a while, fully understanding what Prince Jing meant. It's better to believe it than to disbelieve it, he said. I'll have my people keep an eye on the second prince and the sixth prince. Let's see what they're going to do. And let's see what the person who wrote the letter wants. Thank you for your quick reminder. I probably would have had a headache over this for a while. Ye Qinghuan smiled candidly and patted Prince Jing's shoulder. Outsiders all said Prince Jing was withdrawn and didn't care about anything, but in actuality, he was careful and perceptive. Ye Qinghuan's overly familiar action made Prince Jing furrow his brow slightly. Oh, right. Ye Qinghuan said. Who do you think sent this letter? They even used Xiongfeng, so they must be familiar with my habits. Perhaps it's, someone I'm close with? Ye Qinghuan's guess made sense. Prince Jing wanted to know who'd sent the letter to, but he had different thoughts. It's true that the letter was delivered through Xiongfeng, but it was also given while Ye Shizi was visiting Prince Jing's residence. If it was simply someone who was familiar with Ye Shizi, why would they do it right under Prince Jing's nose? Prince Jing was more inclined to believe that the person was already embedded in his residence somehow, and only used Ye Shizi's visit as an opportunity to give him the letter. The people and connections mentioned in the letter were complex and entangled. Taking another glance at the wild writing, many strokes were forked, yet each stroke was still forceful. With this type of writing style, the brush would have... A thought suddenly struck Prince Jing. He'd seen a frayed brush like that just a few days ago, in his own room. It must have been that young man. Prince Jing had guessed that he'd written something in his room, so was it the letter that Ye Qinghuan was now holding? Tianchi, what are you thinking about with such a serious expression? Ye Qinghuan put up 2 fingers and waved them in front of Prince Jing's eyes. Prince Jing mercilessly slapped away his trouble-making hand. Ye Qinghuan laughed. Are you thinking about who they are and where they are? I have my own ways of locating whoever it is, but... Ye Qinghuan glanced at Prince Jing and stubbornly stopped right when it was getting juicy. Prince Jing looked impatiently at him, signaling with his eyes. Spit it out. Ye Qinghuan laughed and continued. I have my ways of locating this person. If you want to find out who sent the letter, then answer a question of mine first. Ye Qinghuan felt he couldn't be any more resourceful for using this opportunity to get something out of Prince Jing. He smugly said, I heard you moved back here because you were attacked in the palace. I haven't been able to figure it out, but how did the assassin get into your room when Jingtai Palace, your own dwelling, is full of guards? Ye Qinghuan had been eager to gossip about this for a very long time. Everyone in the palace was trying to guess who sent the assassin, but Prince Jing had already killed her, and the imperial guards who searched the corpse found nothing useful either. There were 2 main theories in the palace. One was that noble consort Xue had a grudge against Prince Jing since the emperor punished her on his account. Even if the noble consort wasn't the one who ordered the assassination, people believed it had to do with her. The other theory was that someone else was framing noble consort Xue. She was the first person anyone would think of when an attempt was made on Prince Jing's life, after all. This was also part of why the second prince was so desperate to reconcile with Prince Jing. Of course, he wanted to help noble consort Xue, but he was also afraid that the emperor would listen to the rumors flying about the palace. As Prince Jing's younger cousin, Ye Qinghuan was naturally quite worried about him and wanted to know who was bold enough to make a move on him in the palace. The third prince was eager to try to compete with the second prince and had covertly allied himself with the sixth prince. The princes were in a state of mutual hostility. So, if you tell me who exactly sent the assassin, then I'll find the person who wrote the letter, he declared. Why did Prince Jing kill the assassin instead of keeping her alive for questioning? Ye Qinghuan was sure he must know something and just didn't want to tell him. Prince Jing snorted coldly and glanced at Wang Xi, who covered his mouth and privately laughed before ordering the guards to grab Ye Qinghuan's collar. Tianchi, what are you doing? Ye Qinghuan was shocked. Wang Xi slowly said, Ye Shizi, have you forgotten? His Highness hates it when others try to negotiate with him. So why did you try it? Fine. He was the idiot for thinking he could get anything out of Prince Jing. Wang Xi ordered someone to lift Ye Shizi up and was about to throw him out when Ye Qinghuan made a last-ditch effort. Wait! If I'm chased out, who's going to find the person who sent the letter? That's enough, Ye Shizi, Wang Xi said cheerfully. His Highness wants me to ask you if you want to be kicked out, or if you'd rather tell us. Come on! Ye Qinghuan complained half-heartedly. He decided not to be stubborn about it, though, and went ahead and revealed his plan, which turned out to be Xiongfeng. Since the person who wrote the letter had Xiongfeng deliver it, Xiongfeng must have seen him. They would be able to find the person if Xiongfeng led the way. This method certainly had not occurred to Prince Jing. Ye Qinghuan untied the leash and jabbered away at Xiongfeng, asking for help. It wasn't clear if Xiongfeng understood him or not, but when Ye Shitsu was done speaking, Xiongfeng licked the center of his palm and turned to trot away. Ye Qinghuan said hurriedly, "Come on, he's going to find him." Prince Jing and Ye Qinghuan glanced at each other and came to a mutual understanding. They trailed behind Xiongfeng. Earlier, when Prince Jing and Ye Qinghuan were gone, Li Yu had turned into a human right away, frightening Xiongfeng into a barking frenzy. When he was in his human form, Li Yu wasn't afraid of Xiongfeng, but he had to feed the dog some red fish food to calm him down. Unexpectedly, Xiongfeng liked the fish food a lot. He stopped barking and even licked Li Yu's hand. After getting Xiongfeng under control, Li Yu took the letter out of his inventory and had Xiongfeng carry it in his mouth to send it over. At this point, the rescue mission was over half finished. The rest was up to Ye Shitsu. It would have been better if he could have gone with Xiongfeng, but neither of the forms at his disposal would be any good for it. As a human, he would be chased out of the manor, and as a fish, he probably wouldn't be able to catch up with the dog. So Li Yu decided to stay where he was and wait for Xiongfeng after he'd delivered the letter. The transformation went smoothly this time, and there was a lot of time left before he needed to turn back into a fish. Li Yu didn't dare run around, though, so he just got dressed and sat in the room, staring in a daze at the soft pink peach blossom-shaped desserts on the table. Each one was shaped exactly like a peach blossom, and they were quite fragrant. Wang Xi said that it was a confection made by a chef from the palace, and Prince Jing would sometimes have some. Since Wang Xi had put the pastry there himself, there shouldn't be any problems with it. Li Yu sat for a while, bored, and then set his sights on the pastry. The last time he transformed into a human, he was much too busy writing the letter to eat any human food. The time before that, he ate the food Auntie Shu gave him, but there were no desserts. Now that this plate of inviting pastries was right in front of him, Li Yu felt a craving. This was Prince Jing's dessert. It was normal for a pet to steal a little taste of his master's dessert, right? The peach blossom pastries were neatly stacked into 3 layers, forming a tidy little mountain. There were 3 in the topmost layer. Li Yu picked a larger one and took a bite out of it. The pink-colored pastry was crispy and sweet, and it really did taste like peach blossoms. Li Yu was worried that his time was almost up, so he finished it quickly. But once he finished the first one, he wanted another, so he grabbed a second piece and shoved it in his mouth. He didn't plan on eating too much, but now that he'd taken away 2 pieces, there was a gap, and the pastry mountain was imperfect. Li Yu gave it some thought, then took out 2 more pastries from the bottom layer and rearranged the rest of the pastries. Now that layer was smaller, though, so he took another piece from the second layer and rearranged that one. As a result, the entire mountain shrank. Li Yu nodded, satisfied, and ate the excess peach flower pastries, stuffing his cheeks. He was chomping enthusiastically on the dessert when there was a loud barking outside. Li Yu was happy at first. Was Xiongfeng returning after a successfully completed mission? Li Yu glanced out of the window to see Xiongfeng happily wagging his tail, running like the wind with Prince Jing and Ye Shitsu in tow. Crap! Stupid Xiongfeng! He agreed to complete the mission alone. He promised not to betray him. Why did he lead these 2 over? He was caught in a dead end. Again! Chapter 26. Bringing the fish everywhere. Li Yu could turn into a human for an hour at a time now. He turned back into a fish when his time was up, but before that, he was stuck in human form. It was impossible to cancel the transformation halfway through. The fish scamming system didn't give him a way to do it. Prince Jing was about to unknowingly trap him in a room again. This room was quite large, but there was nowhere to hide. Getting into the closet or hiding behind a curtain would be as good as asking for death. Li Yu stood up and ran to open the window inside. He seriously had to jump out of the window again. He remembered that he'd climbed through this window when he used the transformation medicine before, and that it was close to the ornamental mountain outside. The path was familiar. Li Yu tried to open the window latch, but the same window that had opened so easily last time wouldn't budge. What was going on? He jiggled it twice, panicked, but the window didn't move. He suddenly realized that the window most likely couldn't be opened because it had been sealed. There was no need to guess who did it. But when was it sealed? And why hadn't he known about it? A cold sweat broke out on Li Yu's back. If this window didn't work, then he'd try the other ones. But he tried each one and found to his despair that none of them would open. He knew there were guards outside the door too, so he wouldn't be able to get out that way. Xiongfeng's barking was getting closer and closer. Li Yu raised his head. If Prince Jing caught him. Prince Jing had been looking for him for such a long time. Would he kill him on the spot? Should he say, "Stop, master! I'm your pet fish"? It was hard to imagine how Prince Jing would react when he found out Li Yu was his pet fish. But if he just made up a random lie instead, it wouldn't be long before he was found out. If he ended up in Prince Jing's hands, they wouldn't need any special tricks to discover his secret. All they had to do was wait for him to turn back into a fish. He still had one more step of the main quest to complete, but he'd been so focused on saving others that he didn't put much effort into getting intimately close with Prince Jing. If Prince Jing knew his real identity, it would be a miracle if he didn't kill him. He definitely wouldn't be allowed to do any more of his quests. Was there really nothing he could do? Sweat rolled down Li Yu's nose as his eyes frantically darted around, sweeping across every single object in the room. Prince Jing and Ye Qinghuan followed closely behind the running Xiongfeng. Xiongfeng, about to run into the inner portion of the manor, looked like he was going to run straight into Prince Jing's room. Prince Jing was a bit thrown off. He already suspected that the young man who'd escaped before was the one who'd used Xiongfeng to deliver the letter. Could it be that the young man, even after his intense search, had not left the manor yet? Prince Jing recalled that the people he'd sent out had never returned with any useful information. At first, he'd thought this person was simply too crafty, but he'd left clues in his residence and his room over and over. Perhaps he wasn't thinking in the right direction. Perhaps the person never went far in the first place and had been hiding in the residence all this time, since the most dangerous place was also the safest. If Xiongfeng was on the right track and the thief was really hiding in his room, Prince Jing would make sure he couldn't escape this time. Xiongfeng was about to enter the room when he suddenly stopped and sniffed around. Ye Qinghuan came up and petted his beloved dog's head. "Why aren't you chasing him anymore?" Xiongfeng barked twice, then turned around to go toward the small bamboo forest outside the room, turning to a person at the entrance. "Wrong way?" Prince Jing glanced at him suspiciously, hesitated, then followed Xiongfeng to the bamboo forest. Back in the room, Li Yu had been certain he was about to face a formidable foe. "Sob, sob, sob! Scared the fish half to death!" He didn't know why Xiongfeng had decided not to come over, but one thing was clear. Xiongfeng swerving in another direction had helped him out immensely. His transformation time was almost up. As long as he could turn back into a fish and get back to the fish tank, he wouldn't be found out. Xiongfeng ran up to the person in front of the bamboo forest and wagged his tail, expressing his friendliness. The person was dressed in white. He knelt down and affectionately patted Xiongfeng's head. Xiongfeng seemed to like him, as he circled around him several times. Ye Qinghuan looked him up and down. He would have mistaken him for a woman at first, he thought, if he weren't wearing men's clothing. "Who are you?" The man bowed, neither overbearing nor self-effacing, and said, "If it pleases my lord, I am Chu Yanyu. I reside in the Qingxi garden. I was just passing by, but for some reason your dog bounded over." "So your name is Chu Yanyu. Xiongfeng seems to like you quite a bit." Ye Qinghuan smiled, but he didn't mean anything by it. He was normally kind to beautiful people. He wasn't attracted to men, but that didn't stop him from appreciating this great beauty's alluring face. However, Ye Qinghuan didn't quite believe Chu Yanyu's explanation. Chang'an Manor was exceedingly large. What sorts of tricks hadn't he seen? Xiongfeng rarely ever ran up to strangers, so Chu Yanyu had almost certainly done it on purpose somehow. Ye Qinghuan's frequent visits to Prince Jing's residence hadn't been for nothing either. He knew this courtyard was where Prince Jing put the prospective concubines that others had gifted him. It seemed like Chu Yanyu's origin was suspicious. He didn't think he'd run into someone like this at Prince Jing's residence. Ye Qinghuan burst out laughing. This wasn't his residence, so he just had to watch the show. No need to overstep and intervene. It hadn't been long since the banquet in his residence, so Prince Jing recognized Chu Yanyu. His cold gaze fell on Chu Yanyu's hands. Chu Yanyu claimed he didn't know why Xiongfeng came toward him, but Prince Jing's eyes were sharp, and he'd already noticed that Chu Yanyu had hurriedly kicked a green leaf aside. The green juice on his fingertips had yet to be wiped off completely. Prince Jing's eyes darkened. There was no doubt that Chu Yanyu was lying. He deliberately used some trick to make Xiongfeng run over. Displeased, Prince Jing glanced toward Ye Qinghuan. Since Prince Jing and Ye Shurzi had left in such a hurry earlier, Wang Xi hadn't caught up yet. So Ye Qinghuan, who'd suddenly become a mouthpiece, gaped uselessly. In the end, he just coughed lightly, pretending to not understand. Prince Jing glared at him again, and Ye Shurzi relented. He unwillingly asked, Chu Yanyu, why are you here? Chu Yanyu knelt in greeting, then raised his head and said, I heard His Highness and Ye Shurzi were looking for one skilled in calligraphy. Please let me have a try. Ever since Chu Yanyu entered Prince Jing's manor, he had been staying in Qingxing Garden. Prince Jing's residence was heavily guarded, so it took the sixth prince great effort to deliver a letter to Chu Yanyu. In that letter, he'd asked him to captivate Prince Jing so he could enlist the help of the House of Changle. Chu Yanyu truly wanted to help Mu Tianxiao, but he hadn't so much as seen Prince Jing since he got here. Everyone in Prince Jing's manor treated the residents of Qingxing Garden like outsiders, him included, and had their guard up with them at all times. If he wanted to give Mu Tianxiao a helping hand, he had to get out of Qingxi Garden first and gain Prince Jing's attention again. When Chu Yanyu entered the manor, the third prince had shoved a bunch of money on him to further secure his loyalty. Chu Yanyu had spent a lot of it to bribe a patrolling guard outside Qingxi Garden. The servants in Prince Jing's residence were extremely difficult to bribe, so the guard only agreed to pass along bits and pieces he heard, most of which were quite useless. This time, though, the guard told Chu Yanyu that Ye Shurzi came to the residence with a dog, and that Prince Jing and Ye Shurzi were looking for someone. It seemed to be someone good at calligraphy. The guard wasn't stationed where all this was happening, so he wasn't quite sure about the details, but after Chu Yanyu learned about this, he came up with a plan to run into Prince Jing using Ye Shurzi's dog and recommend himself for the position. He was an avid reader and remembered reading about how dogs loved a certain leaf that gave off a fragrant scent. Someone in Qingxi Garden grew such plants, and Chu Yanyu managed to pick some. He then asked the guards to let him out of Qingxi Garden. It was, in fact, possible for those living in Qingxi Garden to go out for a walk, but they were not allowed to go too far and had to be accompanied by guards. The guard helped him for the sake of the money and asked to follow him in person. Having attained his goal of leaving Qingxi Garden, Chu Yanyu took advantage of the guard's carelessness and slipped away. He'd heard the guard mention the general layout of Prince Jing's manor, so he tried his best to walk in a direction that would allow him to run into Prince Jing. From a distance, he could see Prince Jing and another man chasing a black dog. The guard must not have been lying. The young man had to be the heir to the House of Changle, and the dog was his favorite pet. Chu Yanyu suppressed his fear of dogs, crushed the leaf, and smeared the juice on his fingers. The dog was easily lured in, its nose as sensitive as ever. Chu Yanyu had no role or name in Prince Jing's residence. He was just someone who had been sent in from the outside, so he wasn't even considered a servant and had no right to even call himself this lowly one. He used to follow the sixth prince, Mu Tianxiao, whom he was close to, and Mu Tianxiao knew he regarded himself highly, so he never asked Chu Yanyu to address himself with a lower title. Chu Yanyu did not consider himself of humble birth, so he awkwardly called himself I. It seemed refined and courteous, but it was actually extremely rude. If Wang Xi had heard him, he would have chewed him out. But Ye Shutsu never cared much about these conceited customs. As for Prince Jing, he was on the cusp of rage, but not because of Chu Yenyu's form of address. Prince Jing was very displeased with Chu Yenyu for daring to divert and disrupt Xiongfeng from his original route. Chu Yenyu might as well have said, "I'm the one you're looking for." Prince Jing stared at him for a moment and scoffed coldly. Chu Yenyu felt his confidence wavering under that gaze. Because the sixth prince had asked him to seduce Prince Jing, Chu Yenyu told himself he had to capture his heart. Since Prince Jing was mute, however, he had no idea how to read him. But he did know that the look in his eyes right now was not one of infatuation, and it frightened him a bit. Wang Gonggong finally caught up to them. Prince Jing pointed with his chin and moved his fingers. After some thought, Wang Xi ordered someone to prepare a brush and ink. Prince Jing wrote down a few characters and tossed the paper to Chu Yenyu. Chu Yenyu didn't understand what he meant, so Wang Xi said, "His Highness is ordering you to write each of these characters once." Ye Qinghuan moved closer to glance at the paper and smiled. Chu Yenyu didn't know this, but those characters were ones that had been on the letter. Chu Yenyu said he was the one they were looking for, so obviously they had to check his handwriting. Chu Yenyu thanked him and copied the characters after some deliberation. To impress Prince Jing, he wrote the characters beautifully in small, regular script lettering with one hand, then again in flowing, unrestrained cursive with the other. He was always worrying about how he had never been able to show off his talents. Everyone praised him for his looks, but it was his talent that he was truly proud of. And this was it. Unfortunately, Prince Jing only glanced at his talent indifferently. Even the brush he had just set aside got a longer glance. Prince Jing flicked his sleeves in disgust, and Wang Xi immediately said, "His Highness says you're not the one he's looking for, and to fuck off." Chu Yenyu was struck dumb. He still wanted to say something, but Wang Xi had already ordered the guards to take him away. He heard Wang Xi cursing. Since he broke the rules by leaving Qingxi Garden without permission, both he and the guard he bribed were punished with 200 strokes of the board. The guard was immediately thrown out from the manor, and Chu Yenyu, with all his talent, was dragged back to Qingxi Garden to stew in his own juices. Wang Gonggong said this was Prince Jing's order. If he died outside, they would have to inform the third prince. But if he died in Prince Jing's residence, they could just bury him. Chu Yenyu was more than frightened enough, tears streaming down his face as he lay on his bed covered in injuries. Nobody had ever treated him like this before. How could this man be so cruel? After Xiongfeng was distracted by Chu Yenyu, he didn't want to move anymore. No matter how much Ye Qinghuan tried to get him going, Xiongfeng would just lick his hand quietly. They probably wouldn't be able to find the person they were looking for. Ye Qinghuan smiled apologetically at Prince Jing. He hadn't expected to encounter an obstacle like this. Prince Jing dazedly looked at Xiongfeng for a bit. If Chu Yenyu hadn't appeared, then the original direction Xiongfeng was going in was his room. It would probably be too late if they went now, but Prince Jing still ordered Wang Xi to keep an eye out and got ready to go himself. "Qianzhi, I'll go with you." Ye Qinghuan wanted to know who sent the letter to. Prince Jing paused, glanced back at Ye Qinghuan, shook his head lightly, and left. Ye Qinghuan was baffled. Beside him, Wang Xi sighed. "Ye Shutsu, His Highness has his guesses. Please leave it to us to handle it." Ye Qinghuan's eyes widened. "Does he have other clues? Who is it?" Wang Xi's expression became pained. "His Highness had some people investigating for a long while now, but we still haven't even found his name. It seems to be someone's male concubine." Another person's male concubine sent Prince Jing a letter? Ye Qinghuan scratched his head, confused. Was he that charming? Prince Jing stood in front of his room and threw the doors open, but there was nobody inside. He knew that this young man was good at escaping, as well as cleaning up his traces. Occasionally, he might even leave some misleading clues behind, but there would always be some traces of him left. After the young man had escaped last time, Prince Jing secretly ordered Wang Xi to seal the window so it would be impossible to open. This time, at least, it would have been impossible for the young man to escape through the window. As usual, Prince Jing gave his fish a glance. The fish was swimming casually in his tank. Prince Jing decided to look for clues himself this time. He walked around the room once, but didn't find anything. Since his underclothes and underwear had been taken every time, once strewn randomly on the ground, and once mixed in with the clothes he had already worn, Prince Jing thought that he should start with the clothes, so he opened his closet. He didn't notice that there was a gaze behind him that had followed him since he entered the room. In the crystal fish tank, the little carp was practically glued to the fish tank, almost not daring to breathe, as he watched Prince Jing rummaging around his room. Xiongfang had bought him time by not coming directly into the room, so Li Yu had taken off all the clothes he was wearing. Ever since the increase in his inventory size, one slot held clean water and the second slot held other things. After the letter was delivered, a slot became available that would definitely fit a set of clothes. But if he put it in there and Prince Jing wasn't able to find his clothing, he would still suspect that his clothes were stolen. So Li Yu just folded them up and put them back in the closet. It quickly became obvious that he'd made the right choice. Prince Jing simply curled his lips up after opening the closet, as if he didn't find anything suspicious. But in the next moment, even though he shouldn't have noticed anything, Prince Jing effortlessly pulled out the clothes Li Yu had been wearing. What? Li Yu was stupefied. He even forgot to swim. How did he do it? He'd been way more careful than usual. The clothes weren't dirty, and they'd looked the same as all the other folded clothes in the closet. He didn't put them on the top either, so Prince Jing shouldn't have noticed. Li Yu had no idea that Prince Jing had secretly ordered Wang Xi to embroider numbers on the inner linings of his clothes after the second time his clothes were taken. The clothes that were placed in the closet had to be ordered by number. Since the thief had stolen from him twice, Prince Jing suspected the thief would do it again. As long as he checked the order of the numbers, he would know whether someone had moved them, and someone did. But that was all he found. The thief wasn't trapped in the room like he'd thought he'd be. He'd gotten away again, and with a method he couldn't figure out. Prince Jing walked over to the tank, watching his fish swim and thinking about the young man's whereabouts. The look of concentration on his face made Li Yu afraid. He was so handsome. No, it was because Prince Jing was too smart. He was always just about to figure out Li Yu's identity. Li Yu couldn't underestimate him. Li Yu made up his mind and decided to sell himself again. But Prince Jing was with him all the time, so it was probably hard to impress him anymore. Thanks to Xiongfang, Li Yu was reminded that some dogs, Xiongfang included, like to run in circles and chase their tails. Li Yu planned to give it a try and chase his own tail. Even if he looked silly, it was fine as long as he could distract Prince Jing. Li Yu twisted his body, chasing the tip of his tail as he tried to resist the shame, repeating to himself silently, "As long as you don't treat your tail as a tail." As he chased it around, he was surprised to find that his head could touch his tail. Thanks to his fish nature, Li Yu couldn't resist playing with it. I accidentally got carried away. Ah! Prince Jing quickly noticed his fish playing with his tail and watched him for a bit without realizing it. This was new to him. He'd never seen a fish playing with its tail before. When the fish stopped, Prince Jing scooped him out and plopped him into a nearby tea bowl as always, petting him a little. Li Yu shamelessly wrapped his tail, which had just patted his own head, around Prince Jing's finger. The coldness in Prince Jing's eyes slowly disappeared, and he smiled and shook his head. He said he didn't want it, but he definitely wanted it deep down. Li Yu saw right through his insincere master and wouldn't let go of his finger. Suddenly, Prince Jing looked surprised, as if he'd seen something. He stopped playing with him and pushed the fish's head lightly to the side. Li Yu was puzzled. But the reason quickly became clear as Prince Jing carefully removed a piece of food stuck between a fin and his body. Li Yu usually ate fish food, so it wasn't out of the ordinary for him to drop a few pieces of fish food here and there. Since he was Prince Jing's fish, there was no need to worry about getting the water dirty, as the servants changed his water frequently enough. But the piece of food was pink. Fuck! A peach blossom pastry! He ate a couple pieces of peach blossom pastry while he was human, and when he turned back into a fish, his mouth was still stuffed full. He'd remembered to wipe his face, but it seemed like he hadn't wiped it clean. How could he have known it'd fall onto his fin after he had transformed? Li Yu felt guilty, and he was afraid that his identity was once again in danger of being found out. Prince Jing was lost in thought for a bit. He looked around the room and seemed to guess that it was a peach blossom pastry from the table. In spite of himself, the corners of his mouth twitched a few times. Since the little fish could jump around the room, he might have jumped onto the peach blossom pastry. Did he perhaps want to eat one too? Prince Jing wondered. Well, why not? The pastry was vegetarian, so it was probably all right for the fish to eat. He slowly walked over and brought the plate of peach blossom pastries to the tank, breaking a pastry into pieces and sprinkling it into the clear water. Li Yu froze for a moment, shaking his body happily. Prince Jing hadn't even considered suspecting him, and instead he was feeding him peach blossom pastries personally. This was the last thing he'd expected. Sob, sob, sob! He felt touched somehow. The texture of the broken peach blossom pastry in the water was still quite nice to a fish. Seeing how happily the fish was eating, Prince Jing picked up a piece for himself. But as he brought it to his mouth, he just so happened to glance over at the remaining pastries from the corner of his eye. The pastries were arranged as they usually were, but it was obvious that the number was wrong. The imperial family was very particular about things, so even snacks and fruits given to them had to be an auspicious number. But it was clear that, even counting the one in his hand and the one he fed the fish, this was not an auspicious number of pastries. The peach blossom pastries had been touched. As soon as he realized this, Prince Jing immediately put down the pastry in his hand. He knew the servants would never dare to touch the things in his room, so there was only one person it could have been. Luckily, the pastries weren't poisoned, or his fish. Prince Jing's gaze grew heavy as he watched the little fish, with a small piece of peach blossom pastry on his head, and patiently tried to push another piece into his mouth. The little fish's cuteness disrupted his train of thought. Prince Jing shook the jade bell and summoned the guards outside the room. All guards reported the same thing. Before your highness came, only Ye Wangxi and Wang Xigongong entered the room, and definitely nobody else. Ye Shutze visited with his dog, and when Ye Shutze left, the dog stayed in the room for a bit before running out on his own. As to whether or not Xiongfang had a letter in his mouth when he ran out of the room, the guards weren't sure. Prince Jing rubbed the spot between his brows. None of this made sense. If Ye Qinghuan and Wang Xi were the only ones who entered the room, then what in the world had caused the clothes to be moved and the incorrect number of peach blossom pastries? If the thief entered the room without the guards noticing, it would have been impossible for him to get out, since the windows were sealed. The thief was still able to come and go as he liked, even though Prince Jing had already made several arrangements. Tianchi, Xiongfang seems to have recovered. Wang Xi led Ye Qinghuan and his pet dog into the room. Xiongfang excitedly bounded to the fish tank, wagging his tail at the little carp to tell him he'd completed the task and begging to be praised. Li Yu swam over quickly and flicked his tail twice too. Stupid dog! Don't loiter around me! But dogs couldn't understand fish. When Xiongfang saw the little carp swimming toward him, he tried nosing the fish. He just bumped into the crystal wall every time, but he still kept on trying. Ye Qinghuan embarrassedly looked on as his dog continued to act stupidly. The scene reminded Prince Jing of something. When Xiongfang delivered the letter to Ye Qinghuan, he was mostly wet, and he was still slightly wet even now. But the fish tank in the room wasn't broken, and it was impossible for Xiongfang to get into the fish tank. So how did he get wet? Nothing made sense. From the unidentifiable, unlocatable young man who kept appearing in his room, to the clothes and peach blossom pastries that had been moved even though nobody had entered or left the room. He felt like he almost had it. Just a little more and he could connect everything together and figure out the truth. When Wang Xi finished recounting everything, Ye Qinghuan's eyes widened. He gulped. "Tianchi," he said, with a hesitant expression on his face. "Your room wouldn't be haunted, would it?" Haunted? Prince Jing paused and gave a cold laugh. Where would he get a ghost? Definitely not. At most, just a thief. And even if there were ghosts, he wasn't afraid. Xiangfeng barked excitedly a few times, still wanting to poke the fish with his nose. Prince Jing saw his little fish shrewdly hide among the rocks, only leaving his tail out. Prince Jing, who wasn't afraid of ghosts, was calmed even more by the sight of his fish. Things couldn't continue like this. He wasn't afraid of thieves, but he was afraid that the thieves would do something to Xiao Yu. And increasing his defenses hadn't accomplished anything. Prince Jing glanced at Wang Xi. Since increasing his defenses wasn't effective, there was only one other option. Ye Qinghuan thought Prince Jing's fish and his own Xiongfeng were somehow fated, so he wanted to take the fish back to Chang'an Manor and take care of him for a couple of days. That way, he could experience the joy of having a fish as well. But before he could bring this up to Prince Jing, he saw Wang Xi take out a crystal bottle that was larger than an ordinary tea bowl. Well, it looked like a crystal bottle. It was adorned with a gold cap and had a handle to make it easier to carry. Wang Xi opened the crystal bottle without delay, poured in some clean water, and carefully put the little fish, still hiding in the rocks, inside. The little carp swam around in happy curiosity as soon as he was plopped into the crystal bottle. Ye Qinghuan was stunned. "What are you guys doing?" Wang Xi smiled and responded. "His Highness is worried about Master Fish, so he'll bring him wherever he goes. There are holes on the gold cap, so he won't suffocate. It's perfect for Master Fish." Ye Qinghuan was bewildered beyond belief. "It's not enough for you to put him in a large fish tank that the Emperor gifted you? You're going to take him everywhere with you?" To think, he even considered asking Prince Jing for his fish. He was going to bring the fish with him everywhere. There was no damn point. Prince Jing cast a derisive glance at Ye Shutze, picked up the crystal bottle, and left. Chapter 27. Fish as Solitary as Snow. Prince Jing deciding to keep him in a crystal bottle and take him everywhere was both lucky and unlucky for Li Yu. The tyrant master worrying about his fish's safety was obviously a sign of affection. Li Yu was touched, but if he was spending all his time in a bottle with a lid, it would be impossible for him to turn into a human. By the time he realized this, though, he'd already been carried around for most of the day. The outside world was just so enticing. Li Yu had never thought he'd be able to spend a day looking around like this as a fish, so he kept his eyes open, swimming idly in his bottle and taking in the sights. Everyone greeted him properly when they saw him, satisfying little Li Yu's modest ego. Okay, sure, they were actually greeting Prince Jing, but it felt good to pretend once in a while. Prince Jing liked to take his fish around with him too, since it was convenient. The fish tank was so heavy that a person had to be specially assigned to carry it. Tea bowls or regular bowls were too shallow, and the fish could fall out if he wasn't careful. The crystal bottle solved all these problems. He could even bring it into the palace with him. Having experienced the benefits for himself, Prince Jing wanted to keep the fish in the crystal bottle. At first, Li Yu was pretty happy with this, but a couple of days passed, and he realized Prince Jing had no intentions of putting him back into the fish tank at all. He was actually trapped in here. He was much less pleased with this development. The bottle allowed him to stay with his master all the time, but he couldn't do any of his missions or turn into a human. He could only watch as opportunities rushed past him, not to mention how uncomfortable it was. A fish trapped in a bottle was as solitary as a flake of snow. He had to get Prince Jing to understand that the bottle might be convenient, but it'd be better if he didn't stay in here too long for the sake of his mental and physical health. At first, he wanted to take extreme measures to demonstrate his dissatisfaction. He thought about trying to scare Prince Jing by flipping upside down and showing his underbelly. But then he saw Prince Jing order Wangxi to affix a chain to the bottle's handle and wrap the chain around his hand a few times so that he wouldn't drop and break the crystal bottle. Prince Jing's palm turned red from the strain. The little carp's heart felt a bit sore and tender. Being uncomfortable because he was trapped in a bottle was one thing, but it was far more uncomfortable, heartbreaking even, to see Prince Jing in such pain for his sake. Li Yu didn't want to scare him anymore. Prince Jing had never had a pet before, so he had no way of knowing what a fish would want. Putting Li Yu in a bottle was intended as a kind gesture. All he had to do was somehow let Prince Jing know that he didn't like being in there. It wasn't like he had a grudge against the prince or anything, so he ought to find a better way than making him scared his fish had died. Li Yu suppressed his curiosity toward the outside world and floated peacefully at the bottom of the bottle. The little carp was usually lively and active, so when he became quiet and peaceful, it was a noticeable change. The moment Prince Jing glanced at Li Yu, he was immensely confused. His fish was in high spirits just now, so why had he become listless all of a sudden? Worried that the hole at the top might be blocked, Prince Jing checked it not once, but twice. There was nothing wrong with the crystal bottle, but the fish was still lethargic, and he wasn't perking back up. Prince Jing ordered the servant who raised fish before to come over, afraid that the fish was sick again. Every time the servant was called over to diagnose the fish, it was always a false alarm. This time was no different. He held the crystal bottle and looked him over several times, but he didn't see anything wrong with the fish. Prince Jing's fish was fine, as usual. However, the servant had kept many pets before and knew that they didn't like being cooped up, so he mustered his courage to tell Prince Jing, in tactful terms, that Master Fish wasn't used to being sealed in a bottle all the time. After all, the crystal tank the fish was originally kept in was quite large. Switching him to a smaller vessel meant his swimming range would become narrower, and eventually he wouldn't want to move anymore. The servant felt a little regretful after he spoke. It had been Prince Jing's idea to put his fish in the crystal bottle, but Prince Jing also insisted that he tell the truth, putting the servant in a tough spot. But Prince Jing nodded, understanding what the servant meant. So, that's what it was. The crystal bottle was convenient for taking his fish around, but he couldn't let him stay in there all the time, or Xiao Yu would become unhappy. He had to consider what the fish wanted too. But he couldn't leave his poor little fish alone in his room, helpless against thieves. Prince Jing came up with a compromise quickly. He ordered fish tanks and larger tea bowls to be placed around his residence in the spots he often frequented. That way, the fish could still accompany him. Once he arrived at his destination, the fish would be taken out of the crystal bottle and placed inside a nearby fish tank or tea bowl. Problem solved. Li Yu only had to pretend to be listless for about 2 hours before he found out he'd achieved his goal. He could spend more of his time in fish tanks now. Prince Jing opened the lid of the bottle and placed the bottle in the fish tank himself. The little carp finally stopped wilting and jumped out of the crystal bottle like an arrow shot from a bow. It was better for fish to stay in fish tanks. Li Yu sighed with emotion as he swam comfortably. He looked back at the bottle, which was still in the tank. It wasn't that he didn't like staying with Prince Jing all the time. After all, that was part of his master's kindness. To show his gratitude, Li Yu danced a special seaweed dance around the crystal bottle, trying his hardest to show Prince Jing what he felt. The bottle was great, and he was happy to follow Prince Jing around as long as he wasn't constantly trapped inside it. Prince Jing, of course, could tell that his fish liked it. He smiled and softly pinched the fish's slippery back. The human and the fish had reached a compromise. Hold on. Li Yu had spent a good while celebrating this turn of events, but the realization abruptly hit him that even if he got to be in a fish tank instead of a bottle, he was still with Prince Jing 24/7. What was he going to do? He still had no way to transform. Had his once-a-day transformation skill functionally become a none-a-day transformation skill? Li Yu's head hurt. Should he let Prince Jing know that the thief, the one Prince Jing thought was going to hurt his fish, was actually him? No. Right now, his plan to save others was more important than the stress that came with not being able to transform. Li Yu's plan to save Yeshutsu had already been implemented. Over the last couple of days he spent in the crystal bottle, he'd heard Wang Xi tell Prince Jing that the people of the House of Chang'an had already started to keep an eye on the movements of the second and sixth princes, just as Ye Qinghuan had promised. Li Yu's goal in sending the letter was to alert the House of Chang'an. Without the romance storyline between Prince Jing and the little concubine, he wasn't actually sure if Yeshutsu's betrothal to the Jinjue princesses would still end up happening. He tried his best to give a shortened version of events in the letter. It didn't matter if this plot didn't end up happening or if the letter was treated as fake. As long as the House of Chang'an didn't fall into the trap the second and sixth princes set for them. Though Prince Jing kept getting in his way, and his identity was constantly in danger of being exposed, Li Yu thought the rescue mission went pretty smoothly. But there was no notification of completion for the Impenetrable Defense mission to save Yeshutsu. If there was no notification, then it meant that the mission wasn't complete. Li Yu's main goal was the saving people part. Finishing the side quest and receiving the rewards was less important. But when he thought about it, did it mean that it wasn't enough to alert the House of Chang'an by sending them a letter? Was it possible that Yeshutsu might still suffer the same tragic fate as he did in the original book? He'd made up his mind to save others, and he shouldn't half-ass it. But if sending a letter wasn't enough, what else could he do? In the original book, Li Yu remembered that the trap that doomed Ye Qinghuan was sprung in the palace, just a couple of days after the Dragon Boat Festival. He'd mentioned it in the letter, but he wasn't sure how Ye Qinghuan would react. So he figured the most direct solution would be to stop Yeshutsu from entering the palace during this period of time. The farther he was from the trap, the better. But stopping Yeshutsu from entering the palace was even harder than writing and sending him a letter. He might have been able to stop Prince Jing from going, but his fins were too short to reach Ye Qinghuan, who lived in Chang'an Manor. Li Yu worried so hard that his fish had hurt. Would he suffer scale loss from thinking too hard? If you thought about it, he thought dizzily, hadn't he already gone bald? Luckily, Prince Jing had the same thoughts as well. Wang Xi had only said that the House of Chang'an had made preparations, but Prince Jing had no idea what Ye Qinghuan was planning to do, so he ordered someone to grab Yeshutsu and bring him over. Wang Xi gave him a good scolding on behalf of Prince Jing. Yeshutsu was a little dejected, just when he'd thought Prince Jing had finally started to care for him. Prince Jing also wanted Ye Qinghuan to avoid the palace for those couple of days. As expected from my master, thought Li Yu, who was listening excitedly from the fish tank. They were truly kindred spirits. Yeshutsu would listen to Prince Jing, right? But Ye Qinghuan shook his head and refused. Tianshi, I can't just not enter the palace because of what was written in that letter. Ye Qinghuan knew that Prince Jing was only suggesting this because he was worried about him, but he also knew that he couldn't refuse to enter the palace for no reason. For one thing, it was an imperial edict. Keeping his guard up on account of the letter was one thing, but if he deceived the emperor or refused to obey an edict because of a few words on an unproven letter from an anonymous source, his parents, and the entire House of Chang'an, for that matter, would never forgive him. I will do as I always have, said Ye Qinghuan with an easy smile. I'd like to see how those people plan to harm me. Seriously, what a stubborn idiot. Prince Jing judged Ye Qinghuan for his recklessness, but after a moment of thought, he gave Wang Xi a meaningful glance. Wang Xi was almost moved to tears. Yeshutsu, don't worry. His Highness has decided to enter the palace with you when the time comes. As long as His Highness is there, you'll be fine. Tianshi, thank you so much. Ye Qinghuan was momentarily touched. Prince Jing was normally so indifferent to others. He wanted to step forward and pat his older cousin on the shoulder, but Prince Jing waved him away, aggravated. Li Yu felt like this was familiar somehow. The sparkly expression on Yeshutsu's face, and the way he looked like he was barely restraining himself from rushing to Prince Jing even though he'd just been rejected. He thought carefully for a moment. Wasn't he just like Xiongfeng? Xiong Feng always wanted to poke him with his nose. Li Yu would hide, afraid, but even through the crystal, Xiong Feng wouldn't give up on poking him. He took another look at Ye Shizhe. It was like he'd grown a tail just like Xiong Feng's. Li Yu could almost see it wagging happily behind him. Dogs really do take after their masters. In the original book, Prince Jing didn't accompany Ye Qinghuan to the palace. Now that Prince Jing was going to go with him, they could take care of each other. Li Yu felt much more at ease, and since Prince Jing had been taking his fish wherever he went lately, Li Yu was definitely going to enter the palace too. He'd be able to keep an eye on Ye Shizhe in person. 10 days later, as the Dragon Boat Festival approached, the king of the country of Jingjue came to the imperial city to have an audience with the emperor. The emperor had the Ministry of Rites arrange a banquet with King Jingjue in the Taihe Hall. Since it was an imperial banquet, Prince Jing and Ye Qinghuan had been invited as well. When they saw the 16-year-old girl next to King Jingjue greet the emperor, the two of them looked at each other in silent understanding. So this was the princess of Jingjue. It was just as the anonymous informant had said. These people the letter had named, who they thought had nothing to do with him, were really starting to show up. Prince Jing and Ye Qinghuan both tensed up. The emperor had received a letter from King Jingjue recently, saying he wanted his youngest daughter to marry into the imperial dynasty. Diplomatic relations between the two countries were good, so the emperor readily agreed. As for who the princess was to marry, the emperor mentally went through a list of men in the imperial city of the appropriate age. The highest ranking options were obviously his princes, but since Princess Jingjue was a foreigner, it wasn't proper for her to become a princess consort. King Jingjue had mentioned in his letter that the princess did not want to become a concubine either. The emperor thought of Prince Jing. Prince Jing was unmarried and couldn't inherit the throne, so it would be possible for him to marry Princess Jingjue. But he immediately dismissed the idea. Since Prince Jing was mute, the princess might not like him. What's more, since he hadn't chosen a crown prince yet, that meant Prince Jing held the de facto highest status as the D prince. If he let Prince Jing marry a foreigner, then how would he arrange the other princes' marriages? The emperor decided to not choose from the princes and turned his sights toward other sons of noble families that matched Princess Jingjue. It wasn't long at all before Ye Shizhe from the house of Changle came to his attention. There in Taihe Hall, the emperor smiled and said, "Ye Shizhe, I'm putting the safety of King Jingjue and the princess in the imperial city in your hands." Ye Qinghuan felt his blood run cold. He gritted his teeth and knelt to accept the edict. Once sat down at the banquet, Prince Jing took out the crystal bottle from his sleeve. The etiquette at the imperial banquet was complicated, and he wasn't sure if his little fish had been stuck for too long. He hadn't wanted to bring his fish into the palace at first, but the little carp swam into the crystal bottle and refused to come out, staring right at him with eyes like shining black jade. Prince Jing smiled. He had no choice but to shove the crystal bottle with the fish inside into his sleeve. When he took the crystal bottle out, everyone around him was shocked. Did Prince Jing take a fish with him everywhere he went? Most of them had seen the large crystal tank Prince Jing had moved out with, and for a while they were rendered speechless. The second prince, who was sitting among the other princes, chatting and laughing happily with others while looking very crown princely, turned pale the moment he laid eyes on this fish. "Second prince, we meet once more." Li Yu flapped his tail casually at Mu Tianzhao. He was going to ruin the second prince's plans again. Chapter 28. Can't eat the fish. When Prince Jing took out the crystal bottle, Wang Xi, not far behind him, stepped forward and placed a small fish tank carved from coral on his table. Clear water had already been prepared in advance, so Prince Jing rolled up his sleeves and put the fish into the water himself, watching him swim about freely for a bit. Prince Jing glanced at Wang Xi, wanting to feed the fish. Wang Xi took out a bamboo box of fish food and handed it over to Prince Jing. He then turned around and glanced at the servants who'd accompanied him. One by one, they brought over the pastries that they'd carried over from Prince Jing's residence and placed them neatly in front of the fish tank. Prince Jing took 2 pieces of fish food and dropped them into the tank. Then he took a peach blossom pastry and split it in half, crushing one half for his little fish and eating the remaining half as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. With nothing to do but carefully watch Prince Jing feed his fish, the onlookers wondered if they were going blind, or perhaps mad. Was this the real Prince Jing? After Prince Jing placed him in the fish tank, Liu Yu docilely rubbed himself against Prince Jing's fingers. The fish food and peach blossom pastry floated toward the bottom. The little carp was getting tired of the same old thing lately. He guzzled the peach blossom pastry first, and when he was half full, he started on the fish food. Seeing how happily the little fish was eating, Prince Jing took another type of dessert, a yindan pastry, and broke it into pieces to feed him. Liu Yu was happy to try new food, so he gave it a taste. The new pastry tasted like peppermint, with a cooling sensation that rushed straight to his head. As a human, he would have liked it, but he couldn't stand it as a fish. Liu Yu took a bite and tossed it away, then happily went back to the peach blossom pastry. Prince Jing watched. It was clear that the fish didn't like the yindan pastry. "There's no need to prepare this pastry any more," he said. Wang Gonggong, known for understanding Prince Jing so well he might as well be a mind reader, immediately ordered the servants to note that down. The servants nodded repeatedly. The people sitting around Prince Jing were astounded. Ye Qinghuan was the only one who didn't find it weird. As music played around them, the second prince, Mu Tianzhao, stood. The Ministry of Rites had arranged for the oldest prince, the second prince, to lead the others in toasting King Jingjue at the imperial banquet. Mu Tianzhao was a natural conversationalist and was graceful and dignified, so his conversation with King Jingjue was quite joyous. King Jingjue praised Mu Tianzhao and drank 3 cups in a row. The emperor was satisfied with Mu Tianzhao's attitude. When King Jingjue praised the second prince, the emperor looked good too. Being capable and proper was another of the second prince's strong points. Mu Tianzhao could tell that the emperor was in a good mood, and he gazed at the smaller figure beside King Jingjue with a smile. He'd suffered several setbacks in succession recently, and the emperor wasn't really pleased with him. But the spy he'd placed in Tianqing Palace had recently sent him a message that King Jingjue planned to marry his princess off during his visit. Mu Tianzhao had put in quite a lot of effort to restore the relationship between himself and Prince Jing, but Prince Jing ignored every one of his attempts. Mu Tianzhao wanted to win over the House of Changan, but Prince Jing and the House of Changan were clearly on the same side. He'd suffered defeat at Prince Jing's hands before, and the House of Changan treated him coldly as well. He'd heard that the third prince had successfully placed a concubine in Prince Jing's residence and was afraid that the third prince would get to Prince Jing first and gain the support of the House of Changan. Mu Tianzhao knew he had no chance of winning over Prince Jing, and he had to find support elsewhere. However, the emperor was always keeping an eye on his sons, so he couldn't be too obvious about what he was doing. That was when this marriage presented itself at his doorstep. Mu Tianzhao had it all figured out. Jingjue was a small bordering country, but they had money and troops, so if he married the princess of Jingjue, her kingdom wouldn't support the other princes over him. If this panned out, his position would be hard to shake even if the emperor ended up taking issue with him. As for the princess of Jingjue, just becoming his side consort would be a huge honor for her. He could even promise her that she could become a noble consort once he ascended the throne. That would be more than enough for the king of Jingjue. Originally, he'd been thinking that even if the little princess was ugly, he'd accept her in exchange for Jinjue's support. But when he got a look at her during the imperial banquet, he found she was stunningly beautiful. She had a different kind of beauty than the women of his own country. Mu Tianzhao was more willing than ever to go through with his plan. "Princess," Mu Tianzhao gestured for someone to bring a plate of dessert and softly said, "This is our famous butterfly pastry. Please have a taste." As its name suggested, butterfly pastries were made in the shape of a butterfly with its wings spread out, and the pastries came in pairs, symbolizing a century-long good marriage. Mu Tianzhao wanted to make a move first, to show others that the princess of Jinjue was going to be his and ensure that any other suitor backed off. The emperor noticed that the second prince seemed to have fallen in love with the foreign princess. He had wanted the Duke of Chang'an's son and the princess of Jinjue to marry, but judging by Ye Qinghuan's solemn expression on receiving the decree, he wasn't very interested in the princess. The emperor wasn't going to make them marry right away, but he'd been thinking he'd test the waters again with Ye Qinghuan and discuss the matter with the house of Chang'an too. But then the second prince popped up all of a sudden. The emperor was a little irritated, but he decided not to blame the second prince. It wasn't as if his son could read his mind, after all. They'd already rejected the idea of marrying the princess to one of his princes. If the second prince had such intentions, he wouldn't get very far unless the princess of Jinjue asked to be a side consort herself. That, he supposed, could be a possibility. If the second prince wanted this marriage, then he'd need to have a few tricks up his sleeve. The emperor wanted to see how Mu Tianzhao would handle this, so he didn't try to stop him. King Jinjue ordered the butterfly pastry to be served to the princess, but the little princess just smiled and didn't try reaching for the dessert. Mu Tianzhao thought that the princess didn't know what the butterfly meant and was just about to take the opportunity to show off a little when he noticed that the princess wasn't looking at him at all. She was staring at something in the distance with that pretty face of hers. What? Feeling humiliated, Mu Tianzhao didn't rush to speak again. His eyes couldn't help but follow the princess's gaze, only to see Prince Jing feeding his fish from the table full of desserts as the fish lay on the edge of the fish tank, wagging its tail. So, the princess was looking at the fish that brought disaster whenever the second prince saw him. Every time the fish flapped its tail, the princess smiled. Mu Tianzhao secretly hated this fish. He didn't want to be rude during the imperial banquet, so when he saw that Prince Jing had brought the wretched thing, he tried to pretend it didn't exist. But somehow, this fish of misfortune had entered his line of sight again. The princess of Jinjue smiled so hard she blushed and whispered to King Jinjue occasionally. The second prince could only hear the word fish spoken softly and nothing else, but that was enough for him. He was certain that the stupid fish had stolen his stage again. The princess of Jinjue had no taste. How could a fish raised by a mute prince compare with him, a future crown prince? Mu Tianzhao glanced at the emperor. The emperor had also noted Prince Jing feeding the fish due to the commotion around him, but instead of berating him, the emperor smiled as if he was happy to see Prince Jing busying himself with his pet. Mu Tianzhao felt a vine of jealousy taking root within his heart. He was the respected second prince and the future crown prince, but he wasn't able to do anything about this fish. Mu Tianzhao sat back, frustrated, his expression turning dark. Even though he was silent for a while, nobody paid him any attention. Thus, the second prince gave a couple of orders to the servant in charge of his food. The servant went to carry out his order and came back after a while, holding a bowl in his hand that contained a little soup. The servant knelt down, trembling. "Your Highness, the kitchen didn't prepare a carp soup today. They can start making it now, but it will take quite some time. For now, I brought white jade meatball soup in case the wait is too long. Would your Highness please at least have some?" The servant spoke quietly, but there was no getting around the people nearby who were determined to pay attention to the second prince. Mu Tianming was seated close to the second prince, and he called out, "Second brother, are the dishes at the banquet not to your liking? Why do you want to drink carp soup all of a sudden?" Mu Tianming deliberately raised his voice as he said the word carp. Most people, after staring in surprise at the second prince, looked in Prince Jing's direction afterward, because Prince Jing was the only one with a carp fish right now. Li Yu, in his fish tank, lifted his head and cocked it embarrassingly. I'm so shy. Does the second prince want to make me into soup? But I'm still nibbling on the food my master has given me." Mu Tianzhao was silent. He could feel Prince Jing's ice-cold eyes look over, and for some reason, he felt panicked. But he didn't even do anything. He gritted his teeth. "Third brother, you're overthinking it. I just wanted to drink some soup because I suddenly became thirsty." His heart felt like it was twisting in on itself. Why was everyone berating him just for wanting to drink some fish soup? Prince Jing shot a cold look at Mu Tianzhao. Wang Qi was silent as he stood beside him, but he had already started cursing Mu Tianzhao in his heart on Prince Jing's behalf. The emperor knitted his brows. Wanting to drink fish soup wasn't a problem. But since Prince Jing was the only one who'd brought a fish, the target of that specific request was rather obvious. Perhaps the second prince just hadn't anticipated that the third prince would expose his little act of anger. The emperor had an extremely good impression of the little carp. The way Prince Jing cared for his pet made the emperor fond of it too. He thought the second prince was being a little too emotional. The princess of Jinjue had been staring at Prince Jing's fish just now, and after watching it all this time, she had also come to like the fish. When she realized that the second prince wanted to drink fish soup, she immediately stood up and angrily said, "Your Highness, how could you drink fish soup in front of such a cute fish? I didn't think you were that type of person." To be honest, when the second prince had handed her that butterfly pastry, the princess of Jinjue had actually been rather unimpressed. She was young, but she could tell that the second prince was trying to use her and Jinjue. She was also well aware that she'd be relegated to the position of a side consort if she married him. She wasn't stupid. A position like that, where she could be easily thrown away, wasn't worth the country of Jinjue's wholehearted support. What's more, there was no guarantee that the second prince could really ascend the throne, or when that would actually happen. Jinjue didn't necessarily want to get involved in the conflict between the princes, so she had ignored the second prince. And when she learned that he wanted to secretly drink fish soup, the bold little princess jumped out to give his ego a couple stumps, even though no one else was willing to speak up. And at the same time, she used the opportunity to hint to the emperor that she wasn't willing to enter a marriage with the second prince. Don't even think about it. Princess, you've misunderstood. That's not what happened. Mu Tianzhao was speechless. His heart filled with anger, and he didn't know how to explain himself anymore. He didn't actually want to drink fish soup in front of the fish. He wanted to butcher the fish and make it into soup instead. Was he supposed to tell her that? It was clear to the emperor that the princess of Jinjue didn't have any intentions toward the second prince, so it would be better if the second prince refrained from using such dishonorable means. To put it nicely, he was trying to get into the princess's good graces, but to put it bluntly, he had failed to attract her. Earlier, the emperor had thought the second prince was earning him respect, but now he felt like the second prince's actions had slapped him in the face. Ye Qinghuan was definitely more suitable. The emperor looked over at Ye Shurzi, who was sitting quietly a short distance from Prince Jing, and silently gave him a stamp of approval for being so mature and steady. He decided to keep the Duke of Changan and Ye Shurzi after the banquet to speak to them alone. The second prince soon learned that the emperor planned to marry the princess to the Duke of Changan's son and was already meeting with the Duke of Changan to discuss it. So, they were in cahoots. Meanwhile, he was immensely humiliated at the imperial banquet and didn't gain anything from it. The princess rejected him, the Duke of Changan refused to help him, and Prince Jing and his fish were laughing at him. The second prince had endured too much for too long. It was time to make a move. Alrighty, everyone, that concludes the reading of chapters 25 through 28. I hope you all enjoyed. There are just a couple of things that I want to talk about. Number one, since I'm working backwards, is definitely going to be about Mu Tianzhao and Li Yu. I just think it's so funny that, yes, like he mentioned, every time they are in the same vicinity, something bad happens with Mu Tianzhao, or he gets framed for something, or looked at suspiciously for something concerning Li Yu. It's just so funny. And I love how he was called out in the middle of the imperial banquet. That was just so funny to me. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention, because I think this is the second or third time that it has been said in the book, is that Prince Jing really trusts his servants. And I say this because there was something that happened before, and he was like, in his mind, there was no way his servants would dare to do blah, 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 blah. And then he did it again. He's like, there is no way my servants would dare to do blah, 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 blah. I was just like, dude, you really trust your servants. And I don't know if that speaks to your naivety or the fact that your servants really are truly loyal to you, whether it's because they actually like you or because they fear you. But given Prince Jing's personality and just the way he carries himself, I think I'm going to believe, yeah, his servants wouldn't dare do anything. Oh God, I hope I'm not proven wrong in later books. Anyway, the next thing that I wanted to talk about was actually Chu Yanyu. So, with him trying to win Prince Jing's affections, it's just not going well. Obviously, from the lack of contact, but then this whole incident that happened with the calligraphy and catching Liu, but not really being able to catch Liu because he turned back into a fish. So, I'm just wondering now, will Prince Jing end up making an enemy of Chu Yanyu? Like, they rarely meet, but in the times that they meet, will he end up like hating him or something? But my original thought was that because Prince Jing did not care for Chu Yanyu, that somehow that would make Chu Yanyu actually like him and try to genuinely fight for his affections. Anyway, I guess we'll see what happens. I'm not really sure where that's gonna go because Chu Yanyu is such a non-factor right now. What do they call it? An NPC at this current moment? Yeah. So then the other thing that I wanted to say about Liu using his time to get the letter to Xiao Yu and everything. I mean, to Xiongfeng. I just knew that food was going to be his downfall. He is so lucky Chu Yanyu came up with his plan because he was going to get caught. All because he wanted to eat his little pastry or whatever. And he just wasn't thinking. But anyway, I mean, where would he have gone then? Because, of course, if he left and snuck somewhere else, then they would have noticed that the fish was actually missing from the tank and then gone looking for him again. But still, that would have been better than being caught in the prince's room as his human form. So that was just really funny. And I'm seeing now he's a little foodie. And that's so adorable. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed these 4 chapters. I definitely did. And yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comment section. And I'll see you next time. Well, I'm Neiman.